This is the Today with Tally podcast. And with that, we're honored to be joined by Jeremy Harrell. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good. How about you, Brian?
Hey, I'm hanging in there, man. You know, every day. Hey, look, it's just getting wilder and wilder out there. But hey, we're here. We're doing good things in the veteran community.
Yes,
And we are raising awareness for 20 million American veterans, to include yourself. And look, I got to say, the last time I saw you, you were getting ready to turn yourself into federal prison. And was around the Christmas time?
Right. Yeah, somewhere in December. Yeah, it was just a few days after that I had a self-surrender. So it's a wild thing to have to walk yourself into prison. Just an FYI, I don't recommend it for anybody. But yeah.
Well, I mean, if you didn't walk yourself into prison, they just come down to your house and grab you and take you anyways. But
that's a good point.
Look, I've known you for quite some time now. We've come full circle as a friendship. When I first met you, I was in the fight of my life, battling the federal government and trying to change some laws for the veteran community, injustices, if you will. And you were running your nonprofit, and I had you on. You were one of my first guests on my podcast, actually. But I had known you plenty of years before I even started this podcast with Veterans Club, out of Kentucky. And I know you've been doing some great things, some honorable things. And now, all these years later, you're in my shoes, taking on the federal government, trying to invoke positive change to look out for the best interest of 20 million American veterans. Because the story that has happened to you, because of the injustice that has happened to you. Now, folks, Jeremy Harrell just got out of prison. And in my eyes, and all the evidence that I've seen, he was wrongfully convicted of a crime they said he committed that, man, I just have a hard time with. Now, Jeremy, people can go and watch the last podcast we did in December of 2024 to get really up to speed. But for folks that will not do that, can you give a quick elevator pitch on what ended you up in prison? And then we'll go ahead and get started with this.
Yeah. So essentially, I started a nonprofit back in 2019 as a volunteer to use the time that I had to help veterans like me. I was rated permanently and totally disabled by the VA many, many years ago. And I just wanted to be part of a solution, right? I wanted to go out and help veterans who were struggling and their families. And so I did that. And we got really good at doing that. And we got a lot of national attention. We were one of the top 5 fastest growing nonprofits in the United States. We were featured on all types of national, local media and publications. And we just really had a niche for helping veterans overcome post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic brain injury, and other life issues. And so in doing that, I got an indictment. One day I got a knock at the door, and a federal agent said that I've been indicted because with my level of disability, he didn't believe that I should be able to be as successful as I was running a nonprofit organization. But the problem with that, well, there's a lot of problems, and people can, they can listen to the show that we did in December and get all the details to that. I won't go too far into that, but there was no rule against volunteering. And furthermore, I didn't take a single dime from the organization. I did this all strictly out of the goodness of my heart and my desire to help my brothers and sisters. And essentially, I went to prison for volunteering too much as a disabled veteran. The expectation is apparently that we must sit in the house on the couch with a bunch of empty pill bottles and alcohol and things like that and never go out, because that's the only reason I ended up in federal prison. But yeah, it was a crazy story, still is a crazy story. But I literally just walked out of the gate from FCI Ashland on May 20th, and I just left the halfway house on June 2nd. So I haven't been out very long at all.
Incredible. I've been tracking this story since it broke. And it seems as if you have a couple of folks that kind of follow posts around, whether it's I'm posting about it on my social media accounts, or putting, podcasts out there on YouTube, or your wife, Erin, doing it, who's been a great supporter of you. I mean, that's a great wife right there, that you had man. A great partner that has stood by you through all these turbulent times. But it seems like a small group of folks that are really out to get you.
Yeah.
What is the motivation there for these folks? Do they know you? Was there a bad run-in with these folks? I mean, because it almost seems as if everybody out there is like, this is an injustice. And then all of a sudden, these folks come in and then say, nope. You don't know the full story. You don't know the full story. I know I've been bombarded with private messages by these folks, and they've even been on my pages and stuff like that. So what's their motivation here, Jeremy?
Well, no, that's a real interesting point. I'm glad you brought that up. Is 99.99% of people who hear this story recognize that I've been wrongfully convicted, essentially for trying to do good in our community. But it's that small group of folks, and some I know, but more than the ones I know, I don't know, right? And so the ones that I know, they have been members of our organization. Some of them have even been members of my board at one point, and they just I think there's a lot of jealousy about the success that I've had in this. And what I do, and they weren't able to perform in a way that we could do the most good for veterans, and they felt like maybe it was too much for them to take on, and then they had to step down, which there's nothing wrong with that. Listen, I never said people had to be as intense as me or any of that, but I just think over time these people had grown to hate me for the simple fact that I was very good at taking care of our veterans, and mainly because of the exposure that our organization has gotten. I've been considered a subject matter expert with PTSD and other veteran-related issues across the country. I've done a lot of things. I've spoke a lot of places about that. And the only reason I ever become a quote-unquote subject matter expert, Brian, is because I have to live with these conditions every day, brother, since 2003. And so that automatically makes you knowledgeable about what's going on. But the problem is some people are in nonprofits, some people are in community work for optics. Many of them are not in it for the reason why we are, and that's to make a difference. That's to make change. We're not out there looking to build our name or build our resume. We're out there trying to do the most good for the people who need us. But not everybody is under that same mind frame. And so what I think I did inadvertently and subconsciously, I think I exposed people who weren't doing it for the right reasons, because number one, I never took a dime to do it. I spent a lot of my time doing it almost every weekend. And these folks, they didn't want to put in that effort. They didn't want to put in that work. And so I think they thought the only way they could feel better about themselves was to try to bring me down. And I think that's what that small group of people that we're talking about do. But I have seen those comments. I rarely respond. I try not to respond, but I have seen them. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I know this next question is going to sound kind of weird, but I mean, with the amount of veterans that reach out to me and probably reach out to you that are in full crisis mode, it seems as if, that government boot is right on the necks of veterans' oppression. And you're a great example of this. You can't be successful because we state that you can only do A, B, and C. And if you do D, you're going to prison. And doing D is the hard work. Doing D is saving lives. Right. Do you believe that the Department of Veterans Affairs is guilty of not following through and actually caring about the veterans that they state that they care for? Do they really want to end veteran suicide?
Man, that's a really good question. I think there are a lot of people that work within the VA system that do care, that do want to eliminate veteran suicide, especially under this new VA Secretary, Doug Collins. But I think under the the last VA secretary, I think there's also an equal amount of people who don't really care. I think they go in and they clock in and they see veterans and they go home and they're trying to take care of their families and they just are really focused on their own self-interest. Because there are several initiatives in the past that I have brought to the attention of the Department of Veteran Affairs regarding mental health, PTSD, and combat veterans. And they were reluctant to partner with anybody outside of the VA. And I never understood that, right? Because there are organizations out there like mine that are boots on ground, that are going out every day, battling in the trenches with these veterans and their families, right? Because we can't act like the families aren't impacted by this either. And why else would you not want to take advantage to partner and collaborate with these kind of organizations? And so that tells me that not everybody is in the business of taking care of our veterans. And I think that also is part of the reason why I became a target, because I would expose that. I would call that out, and I had a platform and I had a microphone, right? And I wouldn't do it in a nefarious way at all. I would do it very professionally, but I'd say, hey, we don't need millions of dollars to put on pill boxes and stress balls and T-shirts about the veteran suicide epidemic. We need that money to be put into research, put into programs that actually solve the problems. We already know that veteran suicide is an issue. We don't have to keep telling people about the problem. We need to fix the problem. And sometimes they weren't on the same page, right? Because here's the deal. You bring in $5 million, you buy a bunch of stress balls for, $20,000, and then you got the rest of the money to do what, and so that's an issue. And so, yeah. So I do believe that there are a lot of folks out there who work at the VA who are just great people. A lot of them are veterans and a lot of them care. But I also think equally there are some that are there for a paycheck or may not even have a desire to understand military culture, which is a big thing if you work at a place like that, or want to go the extra mile to ensure that veterans don't take their own lives. That's why a few years ago, Brian, I don't know if you remember, but there were these veterans who were going to VA facilities and taking their own lives in the parking lot. That's the biggest red flag I could ever imagine right there. And so, I always wanted to be part of the solution, not just in what we do as a silo, but also to partner with the VAs across the country and help them get better at understanding the needs of veterans.
Yes, sir. I personally know a few of those family members that their loved ones did just that. They went into a VA facility and one went into a VA parking lot, and they eliminated themselves, took their own lives because they were one was kicked out of a VA mental health program for not showing up on time because his meds forced him to sleep because he was heavily sedated. And the other one was just delayed and denied care. So again, these veterans aren't just sitting idly by. They want help. And when they don't get the help they need, again and again and again, they finally say, I can't do this anymore. I've tried. I'm done. And they clock out. And when they do that, they're trying to raise enough awareness to everybody out there that says, hey, look, I'm going to take my life, but I'm going to do it because of this. And perhaps this will wake them up, but it doesn't.
Right.
Because our country has just become so numb to a lot of really bad things that are just status quo in this country. And, there's a lot of folks out there that are extremely selfish and they only care about themselves. They don't care about anybody else. So unless these problems are directly affecting people that could actually stand up and help and stand in the gap and help fix these problems, they're never going to get fixed because, again, they're like, it doesn't matter to me because it's not affecting me, So again, if people just banded together, and we worked on on initiatives together and got one done at a time, there'd be a lot of, great change in this country. But instead you have millions of people all doing one little thing at a time. And that's not going to be seen. That's not going to be heard. You're not going to get anything done by doing that. You need to have a massive grassroots organization behind you with everybody with the same mindset and, willing to put in the hard work to say, hey, look, we're going to do this for the greater good of the country, because who knows, one day it could be me, could be, one of my relatives, could be a kid, could be, my neighbor, but who cares? This is a veteran. And so let's take care of our veteran community. Now, what was prison like when you walked in there and you surrendered? Describe it.
Yeah. So, it's a little bit intimidating, right? Because there's, double fences, there's razor wire, right? And I just remember, like, when I hugged my wife goodbye for the last time, I walk in, as I'm walking up to the administrative building, I look to my left, I see the American flag flying. I see all the military branches flags flying. And I look at the Army flag and I go, man, look where we are right now, because of my allegiance to that flag. And then also, most importantly, the allegiance to the American flag. And that was a very tough pill to swallow. In fact, I become pretty emotional at that moment. So I go into the administration building, and there's a correctional officer sitting there, right? And he says, he's asking me what I'm there for. Believe it or not, it's not always obvious. And I said, well, I'm here to self-surrender. And of course, I had a veteran shirt on, and he said, so you're a veteran? And I said, yes. He said, well, what are you here for? So I go into a little bit of the story, right, about what I'm in for. I said, essentially, it boils down to volunteering too much as a disabled veteran. And he said, you got to be kidding me. And I said, I wish I was. If I was kidding you, buddy, I wouldn't be here, right? So we go through all the slamming doors, the metal detectors, and we're heading down to the receiving and discharge area where they dress you out. They strip you of your clothes, and then they put you in their clothes. But on the way down there's a couple other correctional officers. And of course, there's a lot of federal correctional officers who are either prior service or still in the reserve guard. Well, a couple other correctional officers walk down the hallway, and this gentleman's like, hey, tell them what you're doing here. So I kind of go into it and tell them. And then there's a couple of them that come back and they go, oh, we have those T-shirts. The T-shirt I was wearing, Brian, was our Veterans Club T-shirts. So here I am in prison. There's people that work at this prison as correctional officers who are members of our organization, right? And I can't tell you what that does to your mind. You're going, this is insane. And so basically they are I don't know, they just don't understand why I'm there. And so that was my first, I don't know, probably hour in the prison. And we go down, of course, they do the whole strip search, which isn't a fun experience. They dress you out, they do the mug shot, they put you through all these systems and processes, build this folder. I mean, the whole 9 yards. And then you see psych, you see medical, you see other departments down there to kind of classification specialists to kind of put you where you need to go. And then you wait. And then they take you into the actual compound. They show you where you're going to sleep. They tell you what time count is. They tell you what time chow is. And essentially you're walking around for the first, I say 24 hours in this green jumpsuit and these, we call them Jackie Chan shoes. Basically, they're like little slip-on shoes. And then you just, you sit there and spend the night, and your first night is very difficult, right? Because there's a lot of noise. You're in there with about 60 plus men, and there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of chaos. And I just remember laying down in the bed and going, how in the world did I get here by helping thousands of our nation's heroes stay alive, prosper, heal, recover, and go on and live productive lives? I just didn't understand how that could even be possible in this country. And so that was the first 24 hours of being there. It's a very different world. They have their own sets of rules, their own sets of politics, and it's like a huge social experiment. So it's absolutely not a place you want to go. I don't recommend anybody going. But I will tell you this, though, there are a lot of men in prison who aren't bad men. Now, I will say there are some that are, no doubt, but the stigma about everybody being in prison is because there's some awful human being. That's the furthest thing from the truth. When I first got there and I walked into my cell, I had nothing, man. I didn't get a personal hygiene bag. I had nothing. Everything that I come in with was shipped back home. And so all these guys in the unit, they come, here's a new bar of soap. Here's a new thing of toothpaste. There's a new toothbrush. There's deodorant. I mean, just really stepped in, man. And these guys don't have anything. I mean, we're all in prison. Everything that you have fits in a small locker. Some of these guys don't have people on the outside who are helping them and supporting them while they're in, but they're given what they have. And man, that really hit me because it's like, I know people who are millionaires that wouldn't give you anything in a time of need, but yet here are these people who have absolutely nothing, and they're willing to give what they have because you have less than them. And I just thought that was really profound, man, that there are some very generous, kind people who made a mistake. Maybe it could be anybody, right? It's not hard. I mean, if you ask somebody to go and check your mail and open your mail and tell you what it says, technically, that's a felony offense, right? So it's not hard to go to prison. And so you got these guys in here who are showing love right away. And so that's one of my most fondest memories was, man, I didn't think anybody would watch out for me at all in here. In fact, I thought I'd have to watch myself constantly. But man, it really showed that they were there for me. You know, that they were generous and they were kind. And of course, not everybody's that way, right? But for the most part, there's a lot of good people in prison.
Walk me through a day, just an average day in prison.
Yeah. So for me, I would wake up every morning at 5 or 5:30 in the morning, and I'd do some personal hygiene, and then I would sit in the cell and I would read the Bible. I'm a faithful man, actually a chaplain, and so I would read the Bible until it was time for breakfast. They would call chow, which you've been in the military, you know what chow is, but they also call it chow there. They would call breakfast around 6:30, and breakfast usually consisted of one of three things. It was either bran flakes and powdered milk and a piece of fruit, or it would be grits, cake, and a piece of fruit, or you would have oatmeal, cake, and a piece of fruit, right? And so we would eat that, go back, and I would get dressed and prepared for the day. And depending on what was going on, like if I had a class, or I took a Spanish class, or if I had some sort of detail that I had to do, because everybody there in federal prison, if you're not disabled in a way where you can't move your body, they have a different level of disability there. You have to be almost dead. Otherwise, everybody has a job. And so one of my jobs was to be a compound orderly, which means that I would go around the compound and pick up trash and just kind of try to keep it neat and tidy. And I made a whopping $14.82 a month doing that. And I just think it's interesting that the government at that time had no problem with my activity level, right? But nonetheless, so we would do that. Of course, we would meet up with people that we had become friends with. And I read a lot. I read over 20 books. And I did a lot of word search. I did a lot of crossword puzzles. And of course, you got church, you got Bible studies, and then you got lunch. So you go to lunch, and the food there's bad. So you go to lunch, and then you do the same thing until dinner. Then you go to bed, and you get up, and you kind of do it all over again. What's interesting to me is there's a lot of, like, if you get on social media and TikTok, there's a lot of videos of people in prison, and people are so fascinated about prison. But I'll tell you, I was, for the most part, bored out of my mind, right? It was not as exciting as some people think it is. Being separated from my family was the worst. But I will tell you, man, that I've developed some relationships with some folks in there that I will advocate for. Now that I'm out here, I will continue to do my best to help the Bureau of Prisons be better and improve the way that they do things. And I'm already beginning that process now, and I've only been out a couple weeks. But so a typical day, that's what it kind of looks like. And occasionally you'll go to a class about this, a class about that. I do remember them having a veteran resilience group, and it was taught by a CO who was a Marine, and so that was it was okay, right? But it was a way for other veterans to connect. I think we had about 12 veterans in that compound while I was there. So, yeah, I mean, you just do different classes. You can go to the library, but there's not a whole lot going on, man. It's very boring, to be honest with you.
So do you have a lot of freedom to just walk around throughout the day, or do you have to stay in your cell for so many hours a day?
So it just depends. It just depends. For the most part, as long as it's not count time. So every day at 4 p.m., they would have a standing count. That means everybody has to be in their cell, and they would go around and do these counts. And then we'd also have a count at 9 p.m. And then, of course, through the night, like at midnight, 3 p.m., 5 p.m., they do counts. But for the most part, everybody's sleeping at that point. But outside of the count times and outside of your job, you can be out. They call it the yard, right? You can be out in the yard, and you can go to different units and talk to the people that you've developed, friendships with and things like that. But there was always medical appointments. There's always commissary. There's always, you get your hair cut, you go to pill line. There's a lot of different appointment type things. But for the most part, outside of that, as long as you're in the compound, you have the freedom to move around.
Folks, if you're just joining us, we are with Jeremy Harrell, who is a friend of the program for quite some time. He was just released from federal prison in Kentucky. He was accused of and found convicted of receiving over $100,000 in VA benefits while running his nonprofit that he never took a paycheck from. And I know a lot of folks are going to say, huh? Well, you heard it right. Individual unemployability states that you cannot receive or carry on a job with the terminology of gainful employment. Under what premise did they find you guilty of this alleged crime? So
they found that what their smoking gun was in their mind was the amount of hours I volunteered. Right, I was very active with the organization. Nobody tried to hide that. We didn't deny that in trial. But what they couldn't do is they couldn't nail down exactly how many hours I was volunteering, because just because I was in our headquarters doesn't mean that I was in the official capacity of the organization, because our headquarters is set up as a community center. It's a place where veterans, first responders can go. I mean, we have a full kitchen. We have a living room area with a big TV. We have a library. We have an internet cafe. I mean, it's just a place where you go. And a lot of times I spent time there hanging out with other veterans, being a veteran myself. I felt like through trial, they missed that part. They missed the part that I'm actually participating in these programs, even though that I facilitate some of them. I'm there. I'm going through it. I'm also, it's also therapeutic for me. And they didn't acknowledge that. And I don't think the jury really caught on to that.
Right.
I mean, it's crazy, buddy. But
so your wife was a part of this nonprofit as well, right? Veterans Club.
Yeah. She's the co-founder.
Mm-hmm. So now, was she pulling a paycheck from the actual nonprofit itself?
She was not. Her and I never received any kind of compensation at all. There was only one employee, and that was our director of operations. And our director of operations is actually who runs the day-to-day. I'm kind of the face. I have the story. I'm the promoter. That's kind of my role, right? So I come and go. I'm not always there. I don't clock in. I don't do any of that. But we have a guy who does do that. And the whole purpose of having him is because I couldn't do that. Right. So we hired a guy who could do it. It's the most bizarre thing I've ever taken part in. It just makes no sense whatsoever.
Right. Yeah. You're moving around on your own accord. If you're not feeling well that day, you don't come in. And if you do, and if you're not feeling well, you may come in because you might need some therapy yourself. Go hang out and share in that camaraderie with other veterans, with your equestrian side of your nonprofit. Out with the horses, and there's so much there now. What about the assets? Because I know folks are going to be like, well, he didn't take a paycheck or whatever. Is there assets that are here? Were they able to convict you on that part? Or, because I'm just trying to get this story, because it just doesn't make any sense to me. I find this very frivolous, and the motivation behind this for a federal prosecutor in the state of Kentucky to even take this all the way and then to get a conviction. So I just don't understand how they were able to do that with everything that I know, and everything that's out there that I've seen and heard. There is nothing to stand on here, and yet here they are getting a conviction. Now, I know all this happened under the Biden administration, and boy, that is dangerous in its own right. And look, guys, I don't mean to get political here, but hey, look, I'm going to call a spade here, and talk about dereliction of duty at the highest levels of our federal government. Talk about sovereignty of our nation, and here we are incarcerating a combat veteran who has dedicated his life for the betterment of the veteran community and saving lives. This is how we repay this individual for giving not only everything during his U.S. Army combat deployments, but then even afterwards. He's given his time and his effort and all the dedication and sacrifice away from his family to help veterans that are at risk and going through crisis moments. This is a vulnerable community. And if it's not for folks like Jeremy Harrell, again, to stand up and to stand out in that gap and say, guys, I'm here for you. Let me help you. Guess what? The veteran suicide rate will continue to climb and climb and climb. But now we've got stories like Jeremy Harrell out there in the in indictment and conviction and prison time he served as his thank you for once again serving his country in an honorable way. Again, no good deed goes unpunished. Now,
it's funny you say that, because that's the name that my trial attorney used to describe my case. So he has this habit of naming all of his cases, and that's what he called it. No good deed goes unpunished. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just wanted to make that point. That I've heard that more than once, more than 10 times. So
no, and again, I've tried. I mean, look, folks, go listen to the first podcast, because it's going to nail down all the, well, how come he's not answering the hard questions? Oh, this is a soft podcast. No, we got everything out there in the first one. Okay, guys, right now, this is post-prison. This is post-prison Jeremy Harrell. He's come out of prison. He went in. He wasn't fighting nothing. He's like, nope. I'm convicted. I'm going to go serve my time. I'm going to go do what they convicted me of doing. And I'm going to go, and then I'm going to get out, and then I'm going to advocate for the betterment now of prisoners, prison reform. Now, you said, look, I read the Bible every single day. I am a man of faith. Did you learn anything while you were sitting in prison looking at four walls every single day? What have you taken out of prison that you never had in you when you walked into prison?
Well, man, there's so many, really, Brian. And one of the I've always thought that I spent a lot of time with the Lord. I really did. And I realized that I wasn't giving him enough of my time. As faithful as I am, as much as I love him, as much as I go around and I minister to so many, I didn't give him enough of my time. And so what prison allowed me to do is really deepen that relationship with him. And, I'm reading, 3-4 hours a day. And I didn't have the chance to do that out here because life gets in the way, and I'm not making an excuse for that. We should never put anything before Jesus, right? But the truth is that that's what happened. Just like many of us out here, we get carried away in our lives trying to make things happen and take care of business and things like that. I really had a new way of looking at suffering. And as I read, the book of James and where it talks about suffering, it just reminded me that it is a great privilege to suffer in the name of Christ. And there is a such thing as suffering well. And so I trained myself through the power of God to be able to suffer well. And I used that opportunity to be introspective. And I used that opportunity to fly under the radar and just look around. And I used it an opportunity to go and minister to other folks who are brokenhearted. That place, prison, is very oppressive. It is really, in my opinion, it's one of the closest things to hell that I think we'll ever see, unless you go there. And I pray that you don't, that none of us do. But nonetheless, there's some brokenhearted men in there. There are men who don't get to see their families. There's men who nobody checks in on them. They've been forgotten. They've been there for many, many years and they have nobody. And so, I took it upon myself to make sure that they knew they had somebody, and not just anybody, but the somebody. They had Jesus, who was ready to have a relationship with them and ready to help them through the toughest part of their life. And it just gave me a new outlook on ministry and a new focus. And then I realized there are a lot of other people there that are like me, where they were there because they were part of a political attack or weaponization of the Biden DOJ. And again, I know we don't like to get political in here, but let's face it. The Department of Justice under Biden was nothing more than a weapon used against the American people, particularly if you didn't believe or think or vote like they did. And so there were many men that shouldn't have been there. I mean, there's 76-year-old doctors who've been practicing medicine for 50 years who got something wrong on a form that are now in prison for years over a clerical error. It just don't make sense. I think the federal system, I think they over sentence. And I'm working. I'm starting to work to help make these issues known. But man, one thing I learned, and that's just one for the sake of time, but what I learned in there is that all of us need to be there for one another. That we're all in our own stuff, right? And nobody's immune to it. It doesn't matter your socioeconomic background, because here's the deal: there were millionaires in prison, and there were people that never had anything in prison. There were high-level CEOs and executives and lawyers, and then there were addicts, drug dealers. So, I mean, you're in there with all types of people, and there were challenges with that, but it ended up being a blessing because, man, I got exposed to some things that they weren't good, but we need to be exposed to things so we can put together a plan to help solve problems that we see in society. And so while there were a lot of frustrations, I learned so much about different groups of people to where now I feel like I can be better at what I do because I can go to a different culture, to a different area of town or a different ethnicity group and be able to communicate effectively to them and help them the same way I would help anybody that looks like me. So I think that was one of the most beneficial things. And again, it wasn't without its challenges, but just like we're both in the military, you go through boot camp and it's not fun, right? You embrace the suck, but there's a purpose behind it, right? It's like a paradox. It's both painful and productive. That's what I think prison was, even though I had to wake up every day and know that I shouldn't be there. But there were people there that looked at me and said, I don't even think you're here for a crime. I think God sent you here so that you can learn about us, so that you can go out and advocate on our behalf because you've been so good at it. And so that's the message that I brought out.
You're coming out a new man. You're coming out refreshed, and you're coming out really the same man that you went in as. And
right.
I mean, yeah, that but if anything, what the VA and what the federal government did is they woke something up in you that says, "Look, I'm not just a veteran advocate now. I'm going to advocate on behalf of prison reform. And I'm going to advocate on behalf of other veterans who have, gone through the same type scenarios with this whole individual unemployability." But like I said, in your case, I mean, that's about as ruthless as they can be when it comes to somebody that has dedicated their life for the betterment of others without taking a paycheck. So where are things now? So do you have a rating right now from the VA?
I do. I'm 70% disabled.
So
funny thing.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
So are they at least paying you 70%, or have they completely wiped that off because they say you owe them $100,000?
Yeah. So they paid me, but they take it. So I never see it. So, essentially, my family, even though this is a documented disability that over 51 providers have agreed to, and this is, since 2010, I've had this diagnosis, right? And they've been nothing has been wrong until the last, couple years. And so now, that's hurting my family. The other thing that they're doing is they're relentlessly pursuing me still. In fact, we're about 7 months outside of sentencing, and they're still coming at me financially, right? Trying to, collect and garnish and take away any money that we would have to survive. I mean, it's just ridiculous. When I was in prison, I didn't hear of any stories where inmates were still dealing and still fighting their cases 7 months after sentencing. When sentencing happens, it's supposed to be done. But that hasn't been that way for me. And so that's another reason why I feel like I have to stand up and stand out for those who go through this that don't have the support system I have. They don't have the people in their lives that they can call that can make differences quickly. And so I have to be that for them, man. And I think 100% that God has created a pathway for me to just do this to help the common good of everybody. And you're right. I am more fired up than I ever have. I've never been so motivated, to be honest. And you're right. It's not just the veteran space. I'll always do that, but also now including, people who are in prison, people who have been wrongfully imprisoned and targeted and prosecuted. And so we're going to take that as long as it'll go. And the Bureau of Prisons, the director, William Marshall, I mean, we're working together to try to bring these things out front, right? To raise awareness on these things. He's committed to fixing it. He's committed to transparency. He's committed to reform. He's committed to ensuring that the First Step Acts and the Second Chance Acts are implemented fully and consistently and thoroughly, and that everybody gets what they deserve coming as far as the acts go. So, if somebody is supposed to get out and 3 months early because they have First Step credits, well, he's going to make sure that they leave when they're supposed to leave, because you would be surprised how many people are kept longer than they should be because the First Step Act that was really created by Donald Trump in his first presidency. This was in 2018. They're just now kind of starting to roll it out. I mean, how many years is that this act has been in place, but they haven't been implementing it? So you got people who've been there months and even years longer than they ever should have been. And so, talking to the new director, he's committed to righting that wrong. And I believe that. That's why I'm willing to help. If I didn't believe in it, I definitely wouldn't spend my time helping. But yeah, that's currently what we're doing. We're focusing on.
That's a travesty in its own right, to completely jump a complete administration because they probably like, well, that's the dictator's law, and so we're not gonna follow that, right? It's just I can't believe, and I really can't comprehend just how far our nation has fallen, and it's like.
Right.
Extreme times, require extreme measures, and now more than ever, man, that Bible, that's something that I know I should pick up more often. Like you were saying, but life does get in the way, and you never really realize, I guess, perhaps how much time you really do have until you're sitting in a cell looking at four walls, and you're up early and you're going to bed late. And you have a lot of time to think and react to certain things without becoming even verbal. So you can get very patient. You can learn a lot. You can look a lot. You can, encounter new people, new environments, and again, I think that's where you're going to be set up moving forward in being able to communicate with a hell of a lot more people than you ever have before in a way that you're going to be heard. Doing so, you got that street cred now. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I guess you could say that. I guess what comes next is some more tattoos and all that kind of thing. But yeah, man,
you got to do your knuckles at least, man. Like,
there you go.
I mean, come on,
right? Yeah. That's right.
Yeah, the whole street cred thing, that was a total facetiousness. Well, veteran joke. No.
Right. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure, man, for sure. Now, how are you surviving? Is it time for your nonprofit to finally pay you for doing the work of Veterans Club for so long as a volunteer? I mean, you have to survive somehow, some way. The VA is taking away all of your benefit now because it's going to pay back what they said that you stole from them when you didn't steal anything, in my opinion. But so like, how are you going to survive moving forward now?
Yeah. So, Aaron and I and some other people we're sitting down at the table trying to figure that out. I don't know exactly what my role will be at Veterans Club going forward, not because I don't love it, but just because there's more doors opening up now to be able to do this for veterans on a more broad, more national level. But I'll always be willing to help that mission move forward. I'll always come in and advise and consult and ensure that they have what they need to be successful. But I'm confident that it's in good hands. And I'm starting to get opportunities to do the same thing, but even bigger. And I think I'm going to try to do that. I want to get into rooms, Brian, where I can make a difference legislatively. I've done a lot as far as, the social aspect of that and the boots on ground and one-on-ones with veterans. And I'll always do that. But I want to be able to be in the room with the people who are making these decisions on policy, so I can, make sure that they have all the information they need to make good, honest laws and pass good, honest bills that do the most good for veterans. And so they need somebody like that, right? And I know you've done that yourself a few times. And so, there's a great need for that. And so I think that's kind of where this is going to end up taking me. But again, we're still very early. There's still a lot of things to process and sort through. And who knows what God's going to do, right? At the end of the day, God always says, if you want to hear me laugh, tell me your plans, right? Because he has the plans for us. But that's kind of where my focus is at the moment.
Amen. Yep. That's the exact path I took when the federal government committed their crimes against me and my family. A severe injustice that destroyed me. But years down the road, all these bills behind me that I've drafted and have some laws that President Trump has signed into law that has closed 74-year VA legal loopholes that have just absolutely crushed and destroyed veterans and their families for generations after they have fallen victim to VA medical malpractice. So I'm glad that, we were able to go in there and change some laws, and I'm still going. I'm still drafting. Yeah. I'm still, I am still a presence in DC, walking those halls, doing the right thing for the good of the country, to be that volunteer for the good of the country, not a lobbyist, not a profit, nonprofit, but to go in there because of what happened to me can never happen again. And so I stated this many, many years ago, back in 2017, when I first started this mission, that it will never happen again. And I promised myself that I would do that. And I saw it all the way through, and I continue on with that mission. And I know you'll do the same thing. And let me know if, if I could ever be of assistance. And that right there, man, that's Capitol Hill. That's the flag and a brick wall. I didn't choose this job. It chose me. And that is very real. Like you say, I don't wish this on my worst enemy, but It came, we suffered, And like you said, hey, you can suffer well, and it's a privilege in suffering. And I never heard that before, but I wrote it down because I'm going to go to the book of James, like you said, and I'm going to look at it because I think that, because I've suffered tremendously in my life since January of 2016, and I still do. A lot of it is in silence because I don't really know how to still unpack a lot of the things that happen, and a lot of the things that I go through on a day-to-day basis. Now, I have one final question for you.
Yeah, sure.
Because and this is just a veteran question that I get so many veterans that reach out, and this is a hot one right now. And
sure,
we're getting out of a 20-year war on terror. Mm-hmm. We have a lot of veterans in this country that suffer from post-traumatic stress. The majority of veterans, they own weapons. They enjoy going out to the range and shooting or hunting, whatever it may be. Now, it's almost as if the federal government has started a war on veterans, in my eyes. This whole red flag law that is now being initiated, across the country when it comes to veterans openly stating that, hey, I think I have a problem with post-traumatic stress, with anger, and I need help. I need help. And, the VA always says, hey, look, it's okay to not be okay.
Right.
But what I've seen is the federal government entrap so many veterans into stating how they really feel so they can get the help that they need, while the VA does an about face and they begin to strip these veterans of their constitutional rights. What is your take on that?
Yeah, I never think it's okay to ignore the Constitution and to take someone's rights away that way. It's not just veterans who have hard days, right? If you think about PTSD, there's one in 8 people have some form of PTSD at some point in their life, and that doesn't mean they're irresponsible gun owners. I think they need to do this on an individual basis, and what I mean by that is only if there is a credible threat of danger to someone or themselves, could they ever even consider having veterans step away. And I don't mean forever. I don't mean take their weapons and mark them as bad. I mean, get them the help they need. Mm-hmm. Listen, the fix is not taking weapons from veterans. In fact, I think that does more harm, because for a long time, when we're in the sandbox or we're training, that weapon was our comfort to know that we had it. I think taking it away, it creates more anxiety. They feel more vulnerable. They may feel even more afraid than they would have if they had it. So I never think it's okay to do that. What we really need to focus on is how do we treat veterans better with mental health? How do we get better at seeing the signs that someone is in need? And that's where the issue lies. The problem with guns is everything that happens, guns get the blame. Well, here's what I know about guns. If you set one down, and you know this, Brian, you've carried a few guns in your life. You set a gun down and you don't pull the trigger, the gun does nothing, right? It's an inanimate object. It's only deadly if someone who has a hold of it decides to make it that way. But saying someone's having a hard time emotionally, or someone's going through hard times, that doesn't mean that they're going to go out with a weapon and cause harm to anyone. We can't live that way. And these folks, they fought hard for their rights. I mean, if anybody deserves, we all deserve to have our constitutional rights, but if anybody does at a new level, it's the ones who have fought for it, the ones who have been on the battlefield and have watched their friends, die and get killed, or maybe even injured themselves. They've earned the right to bear arms. And I think there's so much other things that we can do besides just have a blanket statement of, if they say they're having a tough day, we're just going to take the guns. Well, here's the deal. Guns aren't the only way someone could cause injury to themselves or to others. So what are you going to do? If someone was really motivated to hurt someone, they could potentially use a spoon, right? So what are you going to do? Take away spoons, take away cars, take away, it just doesn't make sense. I think that's just a cop out. I think that's just they're just trying to find a loophole or a way in to take people's gun rights away. And I think we have to stand firm and not allow that to happen. Veterans earn the right to carry their weapons and to have their weapons, and that's the way it should be.
Yes, we cannot have a one-size-fits-all approach on this.
Not at all.
It just does not work. And, the sad thing is that these politicians know this. The bureaucrats know this. And that's how everybody keeps their power. They talk about the same. I mean, dude, I am 48. My whole entire life, all I've heard talk about in this country is like there's two things: abortion and guns. And and you know what? Nothing's ever changed. In 48 years, it's still the same talking points because they know that it's a fight and they know that it's extremely emotional, and it doesn't matter what is said here or what is said there. It's a stalemate and it never moves. But when something happens, that's how they come out and they immediately stoke the flames and fire up their base because they know it works every single time. And this is why it happens around the election. Give her, plus or minus 4 or 5 months, 6 months prior to an election. And you can expect that because these are talking points that they need out there to, again, fire their base up and get them emotionally involved and connected in their agenda and their political agenda, whether it's an honorable agenda or a dishonorable agenda. So this is where the line in the sand has got to be drawn, and there needs to be reform immediately. And it starts with Jeremy Harrell. I sincerely appreciate you coming on the show.
Yes, sir.
And talking to us. I will continue to support you, and whatever you need from me from here on out, I will do everything I can to help facilitate any meetings, or even further, getting folks in Congress involved. I know right now there's a ton of stuff going on in the country. So getting a hold of these guys right now, when you have breaking news every 2 minutes, it's very hard to get their attention because they are being pulled in a bazillion different directions. So, and everything is so important right now, but it's just like there's so much brokenness out there in this country that it is really hard to try to get in front of these folks to say, hey, look, we got a problem here. My arms are up. My red flag is up. Can you give me 1 minute? And that's the problem. There's just so much out there. There's so much out there. So, hey, be patient, stand firm, and just know you got a lot of people on your side. And I know, there's no doubt in my military mind that you're going to go out and you're going to do big things. And this is going to be a blessing in disguise.
This is the Today with Tally podcast.